All right, morning, y'all. Happy Monday, I guess. We're gonna pick up almost where we left off last time. I got to get through these slides. So we're gonna rush today through the slideshow. Hopefully, it doesn't take more than 10, 15, and then we'll get into a little bit more activity type stuff instead of just listening to me lecture. But this stuff's important, and if I have you learn on your own, it'll take way too long. So, with no further ado, we're going to get right back into the historiography lecture. Sorry, more lecture time. I know it's not ideal for y'all, but this is the way it has to be. Okay, so we'll start the slideshow. So history, the account of everything that happens in the past. That's what we learned last time. It's not knowing specifically what happened in the past, but it is the act of selecting, analyzing, and writing about the past. We can't know everything that happened. You know, if a guy was alone out in the woods for 6 months and then he comes home and doesn't remember it, well, what happened out there isn't history. It's just lost. So in order for it to be history, it has to be written down or talked about, brought up. It can't just be everything that's ever happened. What's the history? So historiography. Well, graphy is study, graphy. So that's why you get geography, geography. Geo is the world. Graphy is the study of it. So it's the study of the world. History, obviously I just told you what history is. So historiography would be study of history. That's what historiography is. Anytime you put graphy at the end of something, it's about studying. It's a Greek word. Our language is based much on Greek and Latin. So historiography is the principal theory and history of historical writing. So the history of history. So that's where we were last time. We learned about Herodotus, the very first historian. I showed you guys a YouTube video about him. You guys answered some questions about how he collected evidence, like giving interviews and reading contemporary sources, and then synthesizing those sources in a book to make a story. A series of books, actually. Then the next big guy, Thucydides, he kind of made history not so much about folklore and storytelling and more about actually recounting true hard facts, things that can be proven. We didn't look at Suetonius because he's Roman and Romans aren't as cool as Greeks. So what moves history? This was where we ended last time. What causes or changes history is the way the world changes. So the world changes, people's ideas change, and so the way we tell history has changed, which we're going to get into a little bit later. I'm going to tell you guys a messed up story about people torturing cats, because that used to be something people did. So if I'm assigned to write my own paper, how do I know what to focus on? This is a question for you kids. How do you know what to look at when you're looking at historical writing? This isn't just in my class, but in every class. So when you're looking at historical writing, I always do GRAPES acronym. GRAPES are easy to remember. So you want to look at the geography. So if the historical narrative is about a country, which country? Where is that country? So if it's about China, okay, it's about China. Religion, you want to look at what kind of religion the nation or empire or whatever it is you're looking at people had. Because that's part of their history. I mean, it'll be different for everyone. The achievements, so this would be like, if you were studying the Egyptians, you would say, what is something the Egyptians achieved? Well, the Egyptians achieved creating the Sphinx. They created the Pyramid of Giza, the three pyramids that line up or whatever. So another achievement would be, well, the United States was the first country to get to the moon. So that was one of our achievements. So those are things you would look at when you're studying a country or an empire or whatever historically. The politics. If you're studying ancient Rome, you would talk about how ancient Rome was once a republic, the world's first major republic, but then it eventually fell into an empire. So that would be, the politics of it. Economics would be what kind of economy did the country have? Did they use paper money, gold money? Were they rich? Were they poor? And then society in general, which was things like culture, like did they watch movies? What did people do for fun? What did they believe in? All that kind of jazz. As far as like, social things go, like were they conservative? Were they liberal? And so this is just an example. If I were going to be studying the Reformation, I would look at the politics. Well, the kings and popes were wrestling for power, and then that caused the church to get reformed, which is what's called the Reformation. Economics, Northern Europe, especially Germany, was growing economically and was getting more powerful than Rome, so they didn't want to pay Rome any money anymore. They didn't see much of a point to be paying Rome money. Religion, well, Catholics versus Protestants, that was the basis for the Reformation. It was Protestants wanted to change the church and Catholics did not, so they fought in a big war over it. Society, well, they were feudal system. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of feudalism, but it was a way people used to live where there were kings. Oops, sorry about that. Where there were kings and queens at the top, and then nobles and noblewomen below them, and then peasants at the bottom. It's the way things were in the medieval days. If you guys have, I'm sure all of you are acquainted with what medieval means. If not, it is the Middle Ages. If you don't know what medieval is, it's the Middle Ages when knights and princesses and stuff are running around. So then an intellectual movement, which would be something I didn't put in the last one. Oh, this is because this is Persia. Whoops. Oh, well, whatever. So anyways, this is the stuff you would study. It's a different acronym, but same jazz. Sorry. So categories can help guide you. If you're ever looking at anything, just think about it in the categories, almost like the who, what, when, where, how, why. Who, what, when, where, why. Get rid of the how. It's kind of like that, those categories, which are also good categories to ask in history. So when you're looking at historical narratives, these are questions we'll ask. When we do the assignment, when I assign you guys your primary source, these are the questions you're going to be asking yourself. And these are the questions I'm going to be asking you on the worksheet. So I'm going to present you with a list of primary sources you can look at, and then you're going to look at them, pick which one you like, and you're going to tell me why was it written in the way it was written? Did the guy who wrote it have a personal viewpoint? Did he think it was right or wrong or whatever? A philosophical worldview, which is kind of the same thing as a personal viewpoint. Like, did he or she write it in order to prove a message? Was it their profession, which is, were they a historian, or were they someone maybe like a surgeon writing about slavery? That'll be one of the sources. It'll be a pamphlet written by a surgeon who traveled with slaves across the ocean. So then you'll ask, what was their profession? Well, they were a surgeon. They weren't a historian. So that's going to change the way they wrote history. Who can read the history? Back in the medieval days or the Middle Ages, most people weren't able to read. So when someone wrote a book, they wrote it knowing that only priests and kings would be able to read it. So they wrote it in a special way, and it was written to priests instead of to everyone who could read the book, if that makes sense. Who pays for the history to be written? This one, if Stalin or Hitler's a little bit better known, so we'll go with Hitler. If Hitler asked you to write a history book, how would you write it? Well, you'd probably write it in a way that made Hitler look good, or else he'd probably shoot you or kill you. And so then anytime anyone reads a book about Hitler written by a friend of Hitler, you have to think they must have written it with Hitler in a good light. That way they don't have to pay the price, or because they like Hitler. So it's important to know who paid for the book to be written. So who's the publisher is what that question will be. Who's the publisher? And for whom is the history written? Well, that's pretty much who can read the history. They're basically the same thing. So those are questions that I'm going to ask you on your first primary source that we look at in a day or two, probably tomorrow. So why does the historical record change? We went over this last time. Why does history change? Well, because things change in the world. People become more literate. The printing press made it so you could print books instead of having to write them by hand. So a lot more books were available then, so people became more literate, and then the way written history changed. It changed because everyone could read, so they started writing to people instead of just to priests. Yeah, and then the other big one is, why does historical record change? Well, more sources become available. We have millions of sources, of primary sources from World War II, and probably 10 primary sources from ancient Aegean Greece. So that's going to change the way you write about it based how much you know about it. So personal biases, political beliefs, economic status, religious persuasion, and idiosyncrasies can cause history to be written in a certain way that then changes the future. Ignore the Gettysburg shoes part. Oh, sorry, I got a stuffy nose this morning. I keep sniffling. So a lot of times things that can happen in history are generalizations, oversimplifying, and hindsight bias that also cause narratives to have some inaccuracies. Like a good example of this is, in the past we used to generalize people into races, and we would say, oh, well, people from India, northern India, are better soldiers than people from southern India because they have a harder life up in the northern part, and so then they must be better soldiers, which is oversimplifying it, because maybe they're better soldiers because they have better tactics, or maybe they're not even better soldiers at all. So just because it's written in history doesn't mean it's true. Yeah, like this story. So the Confederate States were created to preserve the South. This is stated in numerous books as it was a way to kind of make it sound like the Southern states were just defending themselves, where in actuality they wanted to continue to enslave human beings. And since the North passed laws that were viewed as being anti-slavery, the South declared a civil war and revolted. And then later on in the history books, Southerners would say, oh, no, we were just protecting Southern pride and Southern, freedom. And the North was being an evil invader, which is not true, but it's the way that history was told for a long time. Because history is written by the victors isn't even true necessarily, because you could still lose, and as long as it looks like you're the victor. Let's see where we're at. I feel like I'm probably getting pretty long on time. 14, all right, 15 minutes. God, I don't get through these things as fast as I'd like. Okay, so we're at 15 out of 32. So we'll probably spend tomorrow finishing up this, and then we'll get to that work assignment at the end of tomorrow, I think, where I'll give you guys primary sources to look at. So rock on. Yeah, that's all I got for you today. Thanks for watching the video. Take it easy.